Right. Is it recording? It's recording because it says pause. Sometimes it doesn't record. Anyway, so it's recording. I usually post, I can put it on YouTube. And I post it up.
No problem. That's fine.
And yeah, I'm gonna have to move it over.
Real smile. Smile to the camera.
Logistically, there's a problem with it.
Only if all fifty. Can we borrow the box?
All right, so far no one's killed me for this. It's the only way to get people to show up. And anyway, the sign-in sheet is the foolish thing you do too. It's like a lot of work for me to try to go through. I think we got it in the folder here. Actually, I didn't. I should have advertised on the packet. A couple people would have kind of. Anyway, I felt like this past, like actually, past weeks, things have been just. Like the two classes. Right, so we got. All right, this has to be enable editing. I'm gonna. So you're set, right? Is there part of this you wanted to see or see if it plays? Or...
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, that's good. All right. So was Lionel your first job?
Yeah, yeah. Well, before it was lined up, it was quantum.
Oh, Quantum. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Then we became the first of the mega mergers.
Yeah. Yeah, I worked with Arabella and Abby.
I like Abby a lot. It was one of my favorites.
I'm still in touch with her.
Okay, is that where he's at?
Yeah, we got stuff with including wood, some more rapid prototype stuff with the black guys.
Oh,
Got
cool.
me crazy. Anyway, we got the whole thing. I mean, he went to Chicago and went to work with.
Yeah, he took 2 weeks vacation and did high paid consulting for the company, and ended up coming back and leaving us to go work for him full time.
I see.
Is that one in Chicago? Back
Yeah.
then, what they did.
Yeah, Cabot. No, it was grind polishing the.
That's right.
Yeah, but then anyway, he's now an international paper. And with, I guess he's done plastic. So it actually goes back to his training.
Interesting.
The polishing thing is sort of weird, but
Yeah, we all have the same. So they paid him a lot of money.
that's really lucrative deal. Because they, because they end up with a 10, I don't know how big they are now, but they're like 10 centimeters. It's got that thing, it's really expensive. You don't polish it.
You don't take any.
No, it's like a couple $100,000 at a time. They gotta dice that up into thousands of computer chips. All right, so yeah, why don't we get started, you guys? So Kelly Williams is here. He was an undergrad at UC in chemical engineering, and then he's kind of progressed on. He worked at Lyondell, which was quantum chemical then, and like he's now, or first, director or something, he's high up running this company, the film company, Biofilms. And, I don't know, let me know your opinion about the picture thing, like, I thought it was a good way to, I got a good turnout, so that's good, So, but anyway, if it seems like something's kind of crazy, let me know. Anyway, so Kelly's here. I don't know. So the idea is like we want to have like a lot of interaction. So ask them, I'll ask questions. And you guys should just, if you have a question, just ask it. You can raise your hand or you can just say like, what the heck are you talking about? Or I don't know.
Is there a clicker or a clicker?
It's just with the mouse. Yeah. So yeah.
All right, so these are all pretty much here. Everyone's. This, right, thank you. Thank you for choosing things for you. Thank you. First thing I have to get off your chest, because I don't see enough going into these fields and worry. But this is not my first time talking to students like yourself. And one of the things I find so refreshing about your generation is you are not afraid to ask questions and do something that has made my career, but I didn't need this university doing it. It came later, and I wish I had done it when I was co-oping, which is not being afraid to break groupthink. Do you know what groupthink is? Everybody know what groupthink is? Where no one asks the question that everybody's thinking, so you start believing that's not an actual question because no one else is saying it. You're waiting for somebody else to say it, so you start believing things because no one's asking the tough questions. Your generation does. I love it. And I hear other professors say one of the first things they ask freshmen is, why are you here? And I've heard from, can't say a lot, two professors, two different universities that said overwhelmingly to change the world. So I really truly hope sustainability and circularity is deep in your core to understand, because I want to help you understand it through my eyes and my experiences of almost 30 years, not counting co-oping for what's now ExxonMobil. But I never broke the groupthink then, but I do it regularly now. So I had an opportunity to present, actually recently at a bioplastics conference downtown Cincinnati here. I put this presentation together, and it's become so well received. I thought I might start here because I feel like it's doing you and not, it's doing you a disservice. I won't say it's unjust. It's a disservice to you to go into, whether it's in paper or plastics or wherever you go, because what's happening right now, when sustainability first became a term, a role in a company, generally, you know what, you'll do less damage there. You're going to be my VP of sustainability. What's that mean? Figure it out. Today, there's master's programs, schools of thought. When you meet somebody that's in a high-ranking sustainability position, whether it's a brand new retailer, or a converter, or a raw material manufacturer, I'm telling you, they are either very well experienced in that field, or they're learning at a rate you can only imagine. So I'm going to try to give you a collective absorption of that here. Because what happens is we're extrapolating a future state of the world. And you guys understand extrapolation, right? How do you extrapolate from a current set of data? No one's giving you the historical data for which to increase the accuracy of your extrapolation. I'm going to give you that. And it starts here. You live your life forward, you understand it in reverse. And I'm going to give you just a little bit of a look back to the evolution of it. And then I'm going to give you a look forward. So the way I break it down is in 40-year increments. It's the only way to do it. It's justice. I'm starting in the year 1900. Why? Because of cellophane, PVDC coated cellophane. This was a DuPont ad. That film made from wood pulp allows you to, in a barrier film, wrap and seal perishable products. It allowed the general store to become a grocery store. What's polyvinyl dichloride? Oh, barrier coating. All right, they had that before. And no one's truly replaced it yet. Okay. No one's replaced PVDC and the barrier properties of it. But Piggly Wiggly was believed to be the first retailer, so standardization, brand loyalty, that's kind of the impetus where that started. The Great Depression, car culture, single family, all these really fed the value proposition of a grocery store. This was also the first use of metallization on paper
not for barrier, but the reason I want to introduce metallization right here is because that's the can of WD-40 that kept loosening the spigot of plastics, is metallization. So I want to point that out. Also back then versus now, today, paper science are pulp and paper people. 93% of the world's pulp comes from the craft process. So I would really call it science, it's materials, commercialization, and back then they actually did really good science in cellulosics. In fact, the actual technology to replace PFAS, anybody familiar with PFAS? Forever chemicals? Was a tappy paper in 1966 on sodium alginate, back when they did that kind of research. So old is the new, and you're going to see it continue to play out.
So cellophane is just paper, where the fibers of that kind of.
I'm going to explain it because that's actually, you're right into. Just take note that packaging started with natural materials. Anyone heard of nanocellulose? Nanocellulose, being able to separate those cellulose chains, fibrillate them down to literally a single strand or close to a single strand. Problem with that is it's always going to be 97% water, because that's how much water you need to keep those granule forces from slapping together. The ligand and hemicellulose keeps it apart in the tree. When you start unraveling those bundles, you got to keep it from doing that. Cellophane is actually a nanocellulose. You take wood pulp, you dissolve it. Well, cellulose isn't dissolvable in water. That's one of the bad parts of that process, is it uses carbon disulfide to make it, to create a xanthate, and that xanthate can go into water.
So what does carbon disulfide do to
It's xanthation. It's xanthates.
Okay. What does it do to people, Ron?
Well, it kicks off. You kick it off later in the process, but that residual sulfide is still there, but from a carbon footprint, it's no better than polyolefins.
So the sulfide's like a neurotoxin or something, or like thiols, is that what it's?
I'm not a PhD toxicologist, so I can't dive into that topic.
But you don't want to eat it.
But what I can tell you is it is safe to use a food packaging, it's the first food package,
Okay.
right? But the reason that's important, so what happens is cellulose exists as cellulose 1. When you dissolve it and let it, through controlled fortification, come back together, and those granule forces you let happen, it turns and flips and goes into cellulose 2. So those chains in the tree start there, end up like that, and you end up with this perfectly clear BOPP looking film. Amazing stuff. Back when real chemical engineering shit was going on, DuPont invented it.
You guys don't know what the old.
We're going to get into that if you don't. So hang with me.
Oh,
So 1940 and 1980, I call this the breakthrough phase, breakthrough era. There was a fuels industry. There was no petrochemicals and polymers industry. We discovered low density polyethylene, which, if you don't know, it's dug at 30,000 PSI. So the reactor is like a third metal, a third reaction, a third metal. That's how much pressure is in there. So I always think of it as, you know, Ghostbusters, just flying everywhere, like a lightning bolt hit the ground. With all of those phrases off to the side. That's low density polyethylene, which was cool, but it didn't really make a big impact in packaging until somebody came along and said, hey, if we take a catalyst, we can anchor that polymerization and shoot it like an arrow straight. We can create side streams however we want. That's the first spigot event in packaging, because now we can make 1 gallon milk jugs through blow molding. We're making kayaks, road molding, we're replacing 55-gallon drums with high density polyethylene. Much on the rigid side was already starting to really unlock during this time. The next major spigot event came in the late 90s when the mega mergers. Anyone ever hear of Exxon and Mobil? They used to be separate companies that the federal government separated. And all of a sudden, oh, they're back together. We were the first. Lyondell Petrochemicals became Equistar Chemicals, Exxon Mobil, BP Amoco, Chevron Phillips, Dow Union Carbide. It all happened relatively quickly. And in that moment, those people over there with the distillation pumps are made ethylene. They have to make the stuff that I need to make this pellet. That pellet is the value. To literally within 2 years, that pellet became a non-flammable way to move gas. Major spigot event. Low density did find its way Because you can extrusion coat it, it doesn't neck in from the die, so I can coat paper and paperboard at 3,000 feet a minute, and it's gorgeous. Still to this day, the single most complicated contamination, whether it's in a MRF, a material recovering facility, or in compost, is polyethylene coated paperboard. Yet it's still pervasive in the grocery store, whether it's the frozen food aisle, the cereal, cookie cracker aisle, it's still pervasive. But DARPA was trying to figure out how to feed soldiers in the field. MRE, ever heard of it? Meals ready to eat. A lot of our current barrier food packaging we're buying grocery store came from this research. Low density polyethylene let them do what? Extrusion laminate foil. That's how they're able to do it. Then, in the beginning of this, all of our ethylene came from heavy crude cracks.
So foil,
Aluminum. Okay. Calendar aluminum. Polyester, ink, low density foil, low density sealing. That's a typical foil barrier structure. Nightmare for sustainability, but it'll hold, bag of chips and get a margin back, still be fresh. But at that time, because we made all of our ethylene from heavies, for every pound of ethylene, you made 0.3 pounds of propylene. And even though there's more markets for propylene, we were making so much propylene, it was ungodly the amount of propylene. And we knew how to make polypropylene, another catalyst guy for how much it rises. But guess what? It's a different material. It doesn't glow like a polyethylene blown film. But DuPont, once again, figured out what we can do with it. Biaxial orientation. I can cast it, I can heat it up, and I can stretch the crap out of it in a transverse direction, making something really thin, really pristine. Why? Because polypropylene on the DMA curve has a real subtle transition at its melt point. Polyethylene goes. Ryan Brees figured out, but bimodal high molecular weight polyethylene has a little bit more behavior like that. So what happened was they had this amazing, really thin film, clear as glass. So what do we use it for? What's it do? Moisture resistant. It means zero oxygen. So guess what? Cellophane has phenomenal oxygen, or at least, basically zero without the PVC, basically zero moisture. So that was such an impressive material that allowed us to build these enormous supply lines internationally for packaging. You don't blow mold bottles in Germany and ship them to San Diego and put product in it and sell it anywhere effectively. But I can take printed roll stock in Germany, send it to San Diego, fill it with food, I can sell that food anywhere in the world that I want. BOPP allowed us to really change the dynamic in how materials can flow. So what we did is we built these enormous supply lines that are fragile, vulnerable. The pandemic proved it, and we're probably close to proving it again. So that was one of the big declines on cellophane. At the peak of cellophane, 250,000 tons a year global. Today, 2 clamps per week. But still in existence. But this became the backdrop. The industry I walked into, the industry you're walking into, here's your backdrop. Rolls of metallized film, rolls, reverse printing, very archaic approach, but my God, it'll keep your chips fresh for as long as you choose to not eat them and still throw them away, because 30% of food waste still comes from our pantry, regardless of the shelf life we give you. But then DuPont comes along again and does the same with polyester. Biaxial oriented polyester became the dream material. I can take those 2 films, I add the WD-40 of metal on it, now I can do anything I want. Polyethylene went from monolayer films to 3-layer. That 3-layer so they could scrape the trim off the floor, put it back in the extruder. It wasn't for barriers, for just efficiency. Went to 5-layer, just like that, we're at 7 and 9 layer. Because every time the film goes up, we've got nylon in it, we've got EDOH, we have all these other polymers to give the added performance to do this severely over-engineered packaging. The name Mylar was the trade name for DuPont.
How can that be cheaper than cellophane? It's cheaper than cellophane to make a 9-layer film? I mean, that's what I'm like. It seems like cellophane must be really expensive to make.
Cellophane? Yeah, cellophane's, $5 a pound. Where polyethylene's
Just seems like such a complicated process, but I don't know what the cellophane process is. It must be really involved in this.
you start with wood pulp, you dissolve it, and you control the hornification, and you create this perfect film that has barrier, but it's an imperfect film compared to BOPP because it It's a very, absolutely biodegradable. But the point here is, we start, so Mylar, back to the Mylar. So I meet with brands all the time, small emerging brands. And it's so funny, I'll say, what are you using today? They say, I'm using a Mylar bag. So I find it kind of interesting how the first into a field, that name just continues to resonate for decades to come. Now we get into the optimization phase. This is where barrier coatings like aluminum oxide, Ciox, at that Clinton, Iowa plant that I told you I started at, that's where we invented maleic anhydride grafting of polyethylene to let us do things like co-extrusion with EVOH and nylon and all of that stuff. We invented that in Clinton, Iowa. And the simple story, the guy who knew how to do it, drunk at a Christmas party, pulling on the coattails of the CEO, begging him for the money to put in a grafting machine. And it changed the market. So one little inflection point, one little ripple created a much bigger ripple, because now we are well down a path of making the most phenomenal over-engineered packaging the world has ever seen that you can't do a damn thing with after. This, what set reverse printing and laminating. I don't know if anybody knows that, but when you buy a bag of chips or a pouch of trail mix, generally that ink is buried behind that windshield polyester. Then you make it package. The only reason we do it that way is because coatings didn't exist that would keep two bags from scratching and scuffing in a box on the way to a regional distribution center. There was no way to protect it. That was a simple solution. Solventless adhesives, which do not have water or solvents, became vogue, not in packaging, but in bottle wrap. 2-liter bottles was how we made labels really cheap. Now it is pervasively the way all flexible packaging is made, is pretty much solventless adhesive. We also saw during that time, urethane, isocyanate, and we also saw during this time a lot of recapitalization. So again, packaging started in paper. We were right there with it, man. We were out there giving it to the paper people, man. We were giving it to them, all the benefits of plastics over paper, trying to get plastics to run these old paper lines. There was a major recapitalization event that happened in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, that changed that equipment to vertical form fill seal, flow wrappers. And that actually is what kind of led to the explosion of brands. Because brands for $50,000 can get a vertical bagger and be in the business of controlling their own destiny. You actually started to see that rise, put into high gear with rising e-commerce. That's also what's driving pre-made bags and stand-up pouches. But I'm going to go back to that little triangle. The Society of Plastics Institute and all of the plastics money going into that lobbying group told that executive director, you can find the interview on NPR radio. And he said, look, they told him he had to fix the perception. So they came up with this clever little triangle, paid the Italian actor with the tear, playing an Indian, and it did. It worked. We fell for it because the paper process is dirty. Brick and mortar.
Brick and mortar.
So you don't need brick and mortar.
SKU is packages.
Every unit, like a stock keeping unit.
Okay. So when you look at whatever food, it's like, so the company can figure out like a code number.
When you scan it, it's tied to that SKU. It's one-to-one barcode to SKU. Well, we all shop at the store.
Yeah.
I mean, is SKU a new thing for you guys? Do you know what SKU is? Okay. I assume that you did. I'll take that one.
I think you work with the field and you didn't know it, like.
Well, the message here really is how we got to the current state. Okay. Industry consolidation up and down the value chain plays into this too, which I'll cover again later. We did see the introduction of biopolymers during that time.
So
with
that consolidation means that they're buying, just like you said, they're buying their own packaging line.
Equistar, ExxonMobil, consolidation in the material side, consolidation at the retailer level. Look how big Kroger is now. Tyco Plastics became the first buyer of 1 billion pounds of polyethylene to make bags. So consolidation, that's what I mean. Of the brands, the top 10 brands in the world are larger than the next 31 combined.
I think nobody knows that. Nobody knows that that's happening. Well, you know it. No one else knows that. Like that's a major thing that's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I mean, everyone knows how big Walmart and Kroger is now. Kroger's still in the process of buying Albertsons, number 3.
Not, it isn't something they know.
Well, so the fossil spigot at this point is full bore. If so, you may not get this. This is my analogy. So I have a podcast called Earth Feed from Soil to Shelf. And the first one I did, I had 2 researchers from NREL, the National Renewables Energy Lab in Golden, Colorado, and a professor at University of Toronto who's an enzyme specialist, chemical engineer and enzyme specialist, talking about that we're in the 8th era of human history, the new materials age. And if you think about, so I use this analogy because as a kid, I never partook in watermelon because the seeds were a half-side line. Somewhere along the line, this happened. I didn't partake until several years ago. I'm like, yeah, it's pretty good. I'll partake now for some seeds. So you would think about how hard cellophane was. You're taking wood pulp, specially refined in a craft mill to make cellophane, where I just polymerize the shit out of propylene and create bioxide. So it was our seedless watermelon. That was hydrocarbons, that perfect chain of hydrocarbons. We can start hitting a photo chemical engineering hammers and just create this myriad of products. And it just worked. It was our seedless watermelon. You can't give me seeds again. I refuse to take seeds again. Guess what? The seeds don't matter as much anymore. You know, you can take a mouse swab and get a DNA test and find a relative. Do you know why we can do that? Because the polymerase chain reaction. The guy who invented it knew for 11 years how to do it, how to build enough DNA to characterize. But shit, he needed an enzyme stable at 130 degrees Celsius. Ionic acid in California redwoods realized hot springs. He went to the hot springs and they found them a few months later, identified it, characterized it. We don't have to do that anymore. If you know what that enzyme used to do, you can make, you don't have to go flipping rocks in Africa to deal with these seeds. So there's a lot going on in the new material side that may not bode well for some in the petrochemical side. This is when I didn't speak up. So we all see this. This is the growth in millions of tons of plastics from 1964 to 2014. That's the population growth. So if you take this period that I'm giving you, 1980 to current, my God, we just created so many humans. And the reality is 8 billion people are not going to become overnight homesteaders in as much as I could build a parachute falling out of an airplane. So you can't meet the needs of 8 billion people without packaged consumer goods. But what we choose to use for that packaging is absolutely critically important. Chaos phase, that's where you're at right now. And that's why I wanted to give you a little bit of background so you kind of see how we ended up here. So here's where these retailers, so this is some of the big brands that are just gobbling up brand after brand after brand. There are 25,000 brands in the United States alone that would be characterized as early stage or emerging brands, because any of you can become a brand. All you need is a connection and an idea. You don't even have to find a commercial kitchen to make your product. Someone will do that for you. So that really is a good thing for the brands that are gobbling them up. You know why? Frito-Lay will out-season you all day long, but you can create a new product that they can't. So they love it. They're buying all the best, and they're studying them like you captured a unicorn, trying to figure out how they build a following so quickly. Retail, same thing. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's a fact. And as the packaging manufacturers, so in 2012, 17 manufacturers of flexible packaging in North America had 64% of the North American market. 17, 64%. Today it's 10 and it's 86%. So 10 companies have so much of the market, they can't service 25,000 brands. Their order isn't big enough to take it. So that's created some problems, and the reason sustainability is kind of stuck in a quagmire a little bit. But on the material supplier side, it gets even worse. Sun Chemical, Henkel, Micron here in town. These are big global names now. What happens when you become a big global giant in chemicals? Second, your fruits start to atrophy. because they don't understand their downstream markets like they used to, even though they have people in their organization that do, the dilution between the field and the top, it's hard. On the upstream side, they've atrophied their roots, because they're so big as a potential customer. I expect you to come to me and tell me what you want to sell me. I don't have to go hunt for it. So these chemical companies know they have to go out into nature to find those raw materials to valorize into the stuff they do today, and they don't know where to go. They don't know how to do it. They're scared shitless, to be honest, and they'll admit it to you that they're afraid that they don't know, like, where do I go? How do I do it? Because you can take lactic acid, for example. Enzymes will take carbohydrates to lactic acid, the same chirality that makes polyethylene. That lactic acid can be dehydrated to acrylic acid. From acrylic acid, you have all the acrylics that are used in packaging. You can convert it to an acrylate to make it energy curable. So all of these building blocks are there, but everyone says scale. What about scale? Because we built these machines. So during that period of 1980 to 2010, all those mega mergers where I said that pellet became not handled the way of the gas. All of those reactors that can make really cool products are all being shut down. So now a polyethylene reactor doesn't do 15,000 pounds an hour, it does 150,000 pounds an hour. So there's making so much, there's just so much plastic being made. And to figure out how to, so anyway, it's complicated. So this is really where sustainability started to take on a different connotation. So I think the CTQ stands for critical to quality. If you end up in any type of R&D work, this is a common term that you would use. I feel like societally or as an industry, we missed a really big bioaccumulation. But at that time that flexible packaging was eating the lunch of rigid, we all kept saying the sustainability benefits are just so overwhelmingly positive. But really what we're trying to say is that it was the ability to sustainably keep up with excess food production was really what we meant when we said that. So I'm going to skip through this. I put this in because you should understand it. I feel like something that nobody wants to talk about is entropy. Entropy of the current system, entropy of your proposed solution, because the estimate is 1.8 trillion units of flexible packaging dispersed all over the world every year. Retrieving that's kind of entropic, very entropic. And none of the systems to do so are set up for lightweight stuff that blows around. Now, we can't even make packaging that stays in one piece half the time. When you open a granola bar wrapper, you always end up tearing the corner off. So we're not even designing packaging to at least stay in the one small piece versus being in two small pieces. So I threw this in for you guys. I think it's important. And if you want to look this one up, I figured there's got to be somebody that's written about combining entropy, economics, and sustainability together. And this was a couple of authors. I've actually talked to the one at the top. This was in like 1996, 97. But I do think there's some fundamental flaws in modern economics because it assumes what? Endless supply and market conditions will calibrate the competitive front. It has nothing to do with economic impact or ecological impact or anything like that. So I feel like economics is due for an overhaul. But that's the last slide, and then we're going to open up. I just want to give you that same timeline for just a slightly different lens. This is not speaking to you as chemical engineers. This is speaking to you as informed citizens of how we got here. It started right here, the Haber-Bosch process. Our ability to make nitrogen compounds or ammonia was phenomenal, us and in Germany. But after the war, we weren't making bombs with ammonia, so we used it to do. We bombed our farmland. The Green Revolution is what sparked everything over food production. Our population rise is a lot tied to what happened here. The Dust Bowl, all the dust in the Midwest that we're stirring up, cloud. Most of the CO2 we're dealing with is actually from plowing our fields, which is why regenerative farming is so important. But then, John Deere, tractor people, they started really feeding that dry, because now I can grow anything I want with nitrogen, fake nitrogen. Food processing. So you make a lot of food, you got to preserve it. So now we're trying to figure out how to do that. So dehydration, salt carrying, all of that stuff continues to drive packaging demands and packaging delivery. Trade requirements allow us to deliver. Now we protect that stuff as long as you want to not eat it or eat it. This is where it gets interesting because around 1980, so I was born in 72. Anyone born in 70 and 80, we are the official guinea pigs of what will happen when you start your life in ultra-processed foods. And the chemicals that concern came around all of the packaging and all of the additives used in it. We're that basic. So we'll see how that one plays out. So this just summarizes what I was saying, but don't forget this one too. It's we're addicted to convenience. First time I saw hard-boiled eggs in a pouch, I thought, are you kidding me? Why would I buy eggs already hard-boiled? Now you can get them sliced next to a row of salami in a thermoform plastic pack that you could probably fight an intruder with. It's so rigid. But that's not capitalism is going to fuel this. So I feel like you in your field need to really think about what sustainability what sustainability means to you. Hey, when you almost cut your wrist on one of those packs. Yeah, it's
There's some forward here, maybe it's a long time. Go on.
So this is the way I describe sustainability. So there's a lot of, look, there's stuff going on in California that October 23rd, we're gonna figure out how it plays out, but Ohio has a ban on bans. Have you ever heard of ban on bans? Like, yeah, the plastics industry is absolutely behind making sure that we continue to believe, well, it's advanced recycling. Look, I'm a fan of advanced recycling. You know why? Because we need a Molly maid service to clean up the shit mess we created. At some point, landfills will be energy mines. At that time, I think it makes sense. But the thing that we can beat entropy, at the end of the day, entropy decides how this plays out. And PepsiCo's dedicated to making compostable, but everything, and they have 51% of that category. They want it to be compostable. Why? Because of litter. When you hear the word home compostable, that's proxy for I'm scared to death about bringing litter as a plate. They need it to go away because they know it's not getting collected. They know it's going to blow away. The storm's about to hit Florida. It's going to wash all that stuff into the ocean. That's where they're at. So I put compostability as addressing entropy. Because now I'm making things organically recyclable. It helps get food waste to compost, which cuts down emissions. But circularity, I think, this is what I want to try to impress upon you about what circularity means. It's the level of symbiotic and regenerative balance that your company has with the environment. Inside that company, I bet you it's not regenerative. Because boards of directors aren't, capital is not, private equity goes in, makes money, sucks it back out. There are some emergence of venture capitalists that are looking for ways to put their money in and watch it regenerate and take little dividends off of it. There's a new entertainment company called Legion M. Anybody heard of it? Legion M is putting out big actors, products, shows, movies. Owned by who? It's 31,000 members. It's who owns the company. When you take greed and shareholder value out of it, you can think more regeneratively. So right now we're stuck trying to be regenerative in the world, yet within our companies we're not. So you just have to know that. Help change that. Be a change agent for it. Because it's not going to happen overnight. So I see that being another dichotomy that's playing out. But to me, the future of packaging are the two P's. Paper and PLA. And we explain why I say that. Hey, I don't think, so I'm not saying we get rid of tree-based paper. But we don't build any more crap. It doesn't make any sense to me because we have hemp that we can domesticate. So you can deal with the seeds and you can domesticate the seeds itself. So domesticating biomass allows you to take our new modern toolkits of biochemical engineering and do things we couldn't do in 1970, you can do today. So to me, it's non-forestry cellulosics, and it's the whole plant. Government labs are all over this whole plant thinking. In that plant, in that cell wall, you have cellulose, hemicellulose, lignin, and what we call medicine, other things. A process that can separate that into its bits and pieces, then you can valorize it into acrylics and all the different things that are more familiar to the formulators and packaging. You start doing that, but I believe that chemical engineers can be over time replaced with biochemical engineers, the chemistry majors with biology majors. In that plant, you all went through this, but I had to remind myself, photosynthesis 2 is the enzyme. That enzyme takes light, raises the orbital cloud of manganese, and it uses that energy to do what? Cut water in half. Protons, you go here, electrons, you go here, oxygen, you go up. The great oxidation event turned our world from anaerobic to aerobic. With that simple little enzyme, ordinary structure with an embedded metal complex, we can do life. We can make polymers that are free, made by sunlight. And the thing that we can suck it out of the ground, crack it with a thermodynamic camera, and make anything sustainable out of that is mind-boggling to me, because nature's already showed us how to do it. You see those polymers everywhere outside. So to me, this is where it's going. And nanocellulose is where packaging started. I think it's where it's going, because on that nanocellulose, I can polymerize it. We can embed different chemistries into that matrix. So the future of paper, packaging, it's interesting because paper and plastics have always been such divided worlds, no matter where you go. This is what pellet force. Oh, you're a paper. Oh, you're a pellet head. Whether, no matter where it is, it's just this, and it's always, I found it always intriguing. Even companies that have assets for both. Maybe one is intrinsically extractive and one is at least directionally regenerative, is maybe one reason. But I feel like that's the only way that we can solve the decimal point problem, because there's just so much plastics that are being made. Thoughts? Experiences of your own? Who's worked in a petrochemical plant? Anybody? What kind?
Plastics plant,
What, polyethylene, polypropylene,
polycarbonate.
polycarbonate, okay. But see, polycarbonate is one that you can actually make from bio-based feedstocks at least, but you can't make polycarbonate compostable. You can,
You say chemistry is being replaced by biology, what do you think is gonna happen to chemists?
I feel like, I maybe replacing the strong word, there's gonna be a net new demand for a biology oriented training versus a raw chemistry. Enzymes. Hemicellulose modification materials are gonna become more natural materials.
So when you talk about paper for your future packaging, you said that kind of the future of that is on free basis, or the head was your example. Are you concerned about the extractive nature of the kind of like growing hemp? Because it grows really fast, you grow really fast, you grow the head, harvest it. Worried about the extractive nature of the land that uses it all.
That's a great question, because you are seeing a movement towards regenerative farming. So the farms that didn't flood during the last flood in California were the ones that went regenerative, which uses a lot of composting. So I think that is going to tie to that, but hemp is one of the plants that has a net really good carbon capture for its cycle. So it's one of the few that actually fits really well. There's some grains of bamboo that do really well for it too. So people are looking at it from that perspective. But what's nice about hemp is I can grow it anywhere, pretty much. And I can grow multiple seasons in like Tennessee and Kentucky. But that's where we've seen significant progress in domesticating the biomass. So there are certain strains of seeds that just make such great seedless watermelons from a hemp perspective. And I see more of that coming. The craft mills can't process that.
can you imagine a 600 ton or 800 ton per day kraft mill that's now converted to rolls of straw? The amount of space necessary, the reason we use trees isn't because they're high in cellulose, they're not, hemp is higher, almost 2x higher. We do it because we have to densify cellulose to get it there. Because we built these plants to be so big, we have to amortize the sins of the process itself. So the first thing we do in the craft process, the reason the only thing usable out of a craft process is the cellulose pulp, is because the first step is boiling the bark off. At 91 degrees Celsius, lignin cross-links, it's a thermostat. You smear it on the cellulose, and the rest of the unit operations is getting that off. So there's a belief you can't create a dissolving grade pulp without pure out the cellulose. I know people that have proven that wrong, because we look at it through the lens of that craft process, which is produces heat. So whatever is the valorization process on non-forestry, it's gotta be a green system that can separate the plants. So where I'm saying really exciting things is using things like harmonic frequency to find that frequency that helps just break the cell wall apart and extract out the matrix. And you have basically pre-native cellulose. Today, native cellulose is $1 million a ton. As it's very specific grades of wood pulp, they go through 17 unit operations to get it. Right. And then you have water back. You can't be shipping 97% water.
Do you think brand theory has changed so that you have brand recognition, and now on top of that you have that concept of entropy? Maybe a company, maybe it's in a company's self-interest to implement the concept of entropy into their brand recognition, so that instead of creating litter, the packaging, now they like lets quicker solution or disappearing, to protect their brand. Because you think this is something that's studied or a direction maybe a brand is to go back?
I think that's why there's such a thirst for home compostable. Because the next step from home is soil degradable. They really wanted to go away quickly back to the environment where everything's up.
So they want the consumer to do it.
Well, they expect, so consumer education is a big part of this. Really, the brains that get it are the ones that know that even as many homes that get it right, wind will still blow it away, storms will still flush it away, humans will still be irresponsible. In Japan, they don't have public trash cans. You create any trash out in public, you take it home. Can you imagine the anarchy that would ensue if we did that here? We don't even pick up our trash from the sports stadium. We leave it there because we have someone who dump. So we have a lot of reprogramming to do. So the brands are thinking about it from a litter perspective. It isn't what consumers do. It's what the students.
So we change the culture, we might drive the brand into the packaging.
And I would say most brands are increasingly aware of the fallacy with recycling. And it's not recycling, it's repurposing. Because a bag of chips will not become another bag of chips. And it's not recycling because aluminum and glass are recyclable. Polyolefins, like paper, are reprocessed. Up to a point. You only get 5 or 6 passes of a polyethylene or re-thermal oxidative with degrading it through the chemical process before black specks and gels will shut your machine down. So to think that somehow we can create this infinite loop of polyolefins is a fool's errand, because you can't reprocess it. Eventually, it's going to be a park bench, a playground, or a dog, and you can get it. Advanced recycling is, we're going to take it back down to the mine and repolymerize it. Drive to Rumpke, start digging that up and do that, we'll turn it into something else, but I don't see that. Otherwise, you have to have it literally every few counties, for every state in the country, you would have to have a place to take this. So let's talk about compost. We didn't talk about compost. So composters are really worried about this whole packaging thing. They want the food waste. What you can say is governments around the world want a couple of things. Decarbonize industry, which is another reason you can't be shipping stuff into multiple continents in the end. You got to start shrinking it down. We have 30 trillion cells in our body. We don't even notice it. We can take a punch and move on. Imagine 30 trillion being 30,000 cells. Every punch hurts.
we need to start creating a little bit more of a modular, system to absorb those impacts. Compost. So the compost is one food waste. Government's rather over the decarbonizing, we get food waste out of landfills because it's what, 17 times more effective as a greenhouse gas than CO2, which is methane. And landfills are getting full globally. They don't want, they're incredibly expensive to build. So coming back in landfill, multiple reasons, taking food waste out, getting to composters. Composters one. For every pound of nitrogen that comes from food waste, you have to come up with 20 to 31 pounds of carbon as a fuel source for the compost process itself. I believe packaging has a legitimate right to be one of those sources. But the reality is compost will increasingly be in demand. Why? Because I mentioned I'm the case study for the ultra processed foods in the 70s and 80s. The quickest way to reverse what we did with the Green Revolution is to start using compost in our lives. Farmers want compost because they use half the synthetic nitrogen that they used to. They don't want to use any. So we can start getting fake nitrogen out of our foods. You ever wonder why apples taste like crap? They're bland. I just saw a study, heirloom apples, like you grow, or tomatoes, you grow a tomato in your garden, they'll have 3 to 5 days of life on the counter. Instead, we buy the ones that are 3 weeks at a measure 80% less of the nutritional value to get that shelf life. We are sacrificing our own human gut biome for convenience. So our failing human gut biome is the next major epidemic we're going to be facing globally. How many more flavors of IBS or autoimmune do we need to see a fancy new drug in for before we make wonder what's going on? What's that? So the composters were sold out a year in advance. Composter is a healthy industry, but recycling is not. Problem is, they can't take packaging where I can give you 2 pouches, one's fully compostable, home compostable. One is absolute fossil-based plastics, and you can't tell the difference. So until legislatively, we make lightweight packaging compostable, we're going to continue to struggle with it. So guess who doesn't want to see that happen? Plastics.
So how, so PLA films, how you took a fraction of the market?
I mean, PLA is still a small amount. There's a few 100,000 tons made globally. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like the decimal point problem is a real one, which is why I think mathematically that's not going to get there. But I will tell you this about PLA. Does everybody remember the Sun Chips bag that Pepsi tried to do in 2009? Is it, oh, the bag was too loud? It was, but that's not really, I think, why they pulled up the market. It was global recession in 2009 was a bigger reason. But PepsiCo then went on a path with PHA, polyhydroxyl alpha-noate, which are the polymers made in the fat cells of microorganisms. So genetics, dietary restrictions, all kinds of complications to create a fermented polymer like that. For polylactic acid, ring opening polymerization. Is it chapter 1 or chapter 2 of the polymer handbook? Very straightforward polymerization. Nature naturally takes carbohydrates to lactic acid, you convert it to lactide and polymerize it. So I think the ability to deploy PLA plants is a little, they're getting good at it. So I think you can build PLA plants pretty.
I mean, it's a different industry, right? Like you get the monomer plant to make a polymer, standard polymer plant, right? Versus the PHP, you have a biofermentation, get a polymer and separate it and sell it. They're like different, totally different.
Absolutely different. One of PLA does not
So you can
scare.
do copolymers easier than this.
You can create more polymers with PHA, but PLA does not necessarily scare the chemical companies pots and pans and distillation columns and reactors, because whether they put biology through that equipment or they put synthetics through that equipment, they can do that. PHA bypasses that industry altogether and you're fermenting on the polymer. But what I will tell you is that experience of trying to make PHA work in a chip bag, only because PHA is everything degradable, or PLA is only industrial and post-traumatic. That search led all of us in that industry to this following realization. Whatever I said about PLA, I take it all back. It was very rude of me to speak of you that way. Because you know what I can do with PLA, the no polyethylene can do, no polypropylene can do? I can blow film with it, I can cast stone with it, I can bi-axially orient it, I can extrude and build paper and paperboard with it. Hell, I can emulsify it and turn it into a silicone coating. I can graft it, and these biopolymers are very friendly with each other, with polyolefins, they can tie layer to make it more competitive. These materials are actually pretty friendly with each other. So PLA, in my opinion, has every right to claim material ubiquity in packaging. And a lot of brands and retailers have come to the following conclusion. They have not, no, they come to the following realization, not the conclusion. Is that packaging is their issue. But it doesn't help me answer what. What's good enough? The bigger the brand, the scarier that question. Will consumers freak out if I don't give them a 2-year shelf life on a bag of trail mix? So we are figuring out what is good enough right now, because all of the synthetic fossil-based plastic is so over-engineered, we're trying to figure out where it's going to place.
If the needs of the market that you described are inevitable so far, can we, because a main issue with that I'm hearing, is that polymers based on like are, and I'm not familiar with the holding of it, the energy. But it's not very versatile for the system. It's not very any of these needs. So is there any research on like glycoprotein combinations, make these kinds of polymers that have more amounts of like energetic holes, you know, or more uses, in like holding tunnels?
You mean at the molecular level?
Right, yes,
Yes.
like with protein folding?
Absolutely, and that's where AI is really, there's a lot going on with AI and that type of material design.
Just integrating like beta, nano beta cellulose, you were saying, with like an amino component to it,
Yes.
creating more like shape.
Yep.
Well,
This is-
so many things.
I'm glad you said it, because there's a lot of really cool research going on. I feel like there's been, so when I graduated from here, chemical companies read patents, they did discovery research. They seem to be more, we had co-ops, we went after grants. Well, I feel like the chemical companies have lost that. They're so focused on whatever the chaos is on what we just went through, that they're not doing that. So the Department of Energy just this past year put out, it's called a FOA, Funding Opportunity Announcement. And DOE put that grant funding out, targeting decarbonization of food and beverage, including packaging. I was part of the effort to get them to do that years ago. Finally got reflected, and half of the chemical companies that I work with didn't even know that. We have like a limited window to submit applications. The Department of Energy and Department of Defense are looking to put money at regenerative ideas and things, but I feel like there's just a cellular disconnect between research and private sector manufacturing, that they're just not connected. So some of the work that I've seen, to your point, taking native cellulose, and what you can do with native cellulose is amazing. No one's going to any scale of development for it. Out of here, well, it's $1 million a ton. You know, commercial.
I'm still a little stuck on like why you think hemp is so much better than going forestry based for paper, especially when with forestry based you're dealing with so many more options of the base trees before that you can mess with genetically to try to get what you want rather than hemp. And it just seems like as long as you're planning ahead, the planting the trees, even if they take 25 years to grow, is not an issue. When I worked at paper mill, we had different fields that were grown trees that were planned out 30 years in advance for all that stuff. So
Yeah, I do think forestry is where it's done correctly.
yes,
Malaysia and Indonesia, where it's a great field. But where it is managed forestry, I do think it's managed. The problem I have with forestry is that we can't double it. And this says we have to double it. So from a mathematics, I think you almost have to augment forestry with non-forestry cellulosics. We have invasive species, we have 48% is the average harvest index. And what food is grown, only 48% goes into food, the rest is vitamins that can be used to valorize more effectively than filler for animals. Which, by the way, do you know that 70% of the food we grow goes to feed our protein addiction, not to feed us? And it takes 100 grain calories to have 3 calories of beef. And if we don't curb our protein addiction, we will need the equivalent of another India by 2050. Just to grow it and sell.
What was it, the acreage that one cow needs or something like? Yeah, something saying probably.
So regenerative is hard work, because you have to have plots buried, move cattle to it, like there's a whole game of chess to keep that land healthy. But you know what? That farm can handle. It went from 30,000 cells in the body to 30 trillion because it can handle those impacts that are thrown. But it's hard to get farmers. I am seeing this following trend. Some of these older farms, small farms are being turned over to the younger generation, and I get to meet with them and they're college trained, they see vision. So I feel really good about the future of farming. Where I don't see help is connecting them to the brands that are trying to put a better product on the shelf for you, because they worry about the same things. And it's hard to find a buckwheat farmer that's organic certified, regenerative certified. To matchmaking, I think between brand and farms and one of the challenges.
So talk about I guess the lack of research and development efforts on cellulose. One is your company not doing that, and I guess is it really true that nobody's out there doing that?
There is work going on, and there are some major companies experimenting with it. I think for me, because it's so expensive, the mindset is how little can I use to get the effect that I'm looking for versus using it as a scaffold to build packaging from. So right now, I think that's the disconnect. I'm in multiple places trying to stir this activity to start. USDA said, write it up. If I write it up and we decide to research it, I have to be in as a creative partner. I said, tell me where to sign. I'll sign up as a creative partner. It's a cooperative research agreement. So it's just, again, it goes back to networking and influence. We are a society built on influence. Isn't it interesting that we will dislike somebody because somebody told us to, or a news station told us to dislike somebody? And we'll do that without any research. Yet when it comes to taking action for your own self and for your company, we need overwhelming evidence to do it. But we'll dislike somebody without any research. It's you're kind of stuck in that here. There's just, my God, the thoughts of not using fossil plastics is just hard. There's a lot of fear. There's just fear, trust balance. No matter where you go in the value chain, there seems to be a trust fear balance between the steps along that.
Isn't it like, so we're consuming a lot of gasoline, right? That definitely is kind of a byproduct of that. So I think committed to making this not a problem. I don't know if this is petrochemical byproduct. I just wanted to refer.
I don't know if that's necessarily true. Most of the polyolefins today are made from ethane and propane cracking, not having crude.
But isn't that part of the distillation column?
Heavy crude, like down in, like Lyondell was different than everybody else. 70% of the polyethylene is made from gas, 30% from heavies. Lyondell was unique because it was the other way around, 70-30 the other way around. So there was a lot more co-products that Lyondell were able to make because they're cracking heavy crude. And most of the plastics today, like fracking, is what gives us the cheapest polyethylene in the world.
So if you shut that off, you just have more gas, you stop fracking. Say we stop making polyethylene today. There's no backup at home, it's gonna show up. That's gonna be the other question. We'll just shut down the factories.
Start trimming back production significantly. There'll be places you still need to use it. I'm talking about food packaging and the entropy around the reality that when that co-packer ships that pallet or that comes into Walmart and he goes out the door every day, people are dispersing all of that packaging. And I'm telling you right now, we're looking down the barrel 2 to 3 years. Once we really find out the impact on microplastics and nanoplastics and PFAS and PFAS. In fact, I showed it to you. Study just came out of the 14,000 food contact chemicals that we know of concern. A big human study was conducted and 25% of those were found readily in the human body. We still don't know what the impact of that is. So there's going to be a point in time of societal panic about that. Or when Milton wipes out the southern tip of Florida in a couple of days, eventually there's going to be some panic. And probably what's going to happen is you're going to see, just like we did with 9/11, we created the Department of Homeland Security real quick, didn't we? There'll be a Department of Circularity, Office of Sustainability. There'll be some, because the reason that you can't really federalize this very well is because in the 70s we passed RCRA, RCRA. RCRA is the Resource Conservation and Recycling Act. It basically said the federal government said, you 50 states, waste is your problem. A regenerative approach would be waste of the feedstock. How do we optimize the valorization of that feedstock? Until some of those laws, there can't be. Has anybody heard of EPR? Extended producer responsibility. This is where brands are now paying. And in California, 4% is going to reusable in the 8th largest economy in the world. Almost nothing to composting, a little bit to composting. It's all going to go to state-of-the-art recycling centers to continue the belief that we can be empathy. But EPR is easy for a brand. Like, well, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. So, like a produce label, a sticker, if that right now that's being enforced in some countries around the world, being done in Canada, and some they're like, you know what? I'm just going to budget my fines. I'm going to stick with plastic. I'm just going to budget for the fines I expect to get. So until we federalize EPR, I think it's going to be.
I mean, the lawsuits get around that.
So Exxon was
Once they start to sue, there's no limits to what it can be collected from that. And then the more times you break it, the bigger it gets.
Our CEO believes litigation was as much of a lever as legislation.
That only works in the US, so it's how we'll save the lawyers. Anyway, any other questions or? Thanks for.
Yeah, we are just, anyway, short answer is, yeah, email me, we're not hiring right now, but we do hire people here. So, we are interested, would like to get some. So we're based in Columbus. So you might have to live with you, but I grew up around here, I thought the agents order and like lived in Columbus, but I saw it.
Yeah. I'm gonna say, I could take my. It's like.